Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is our TNA show for the week. First off, let's start off with the so-so portion of the night. The stuff that wasn't bad, wasn't good, it was just there. We'll start off with a 6-man tag X Division match. Homicide, DJZ, and Manic versus Crazy Steve, Tigre Uno, and Low Key. There are a lot of things that just made me not care about this. We don't have any storylines with basically any of these guys other than maybe DJZ and Low Key and Homicide recently challenging for the title. The groupings were a little bit weird. It was just like, okay, we're going to randomize and put 3 guys on this team and 3 guys on that team. No real kind of determined heel team or face team, although I guess you could say the team with DJZ is the heel team because DJZ is the only one that's been noted as face and heel other than Crazy Steve, who's somewhat been a face. Just a weird match with not a lot of time, too much crammed into too little time. Homicide, DJZ, and Manic pick up the win. Could have been better, could have been more explained, could have been given more time, in my opinion. Next up, we have Ethan Carter III versus Rhino in a grudge match after we seen Ethan Carter III attack Rhino last time. An okay match. I think they relied a little bit too much on the Spud, Rockstar Spud outside interference angle, which cost EC3 the match when Rhino gets the win after the second time Spud tries to interfere, and then EC3 hits Rhino with a chair. I think EC3 is a better talent than this. He should be being shown as being on the level of a guy like Rhino. You know, if you want to start building up your young talent, a guy like Rhino is a guy to do it with. He's a known commodity. People have known him to be world champion, either in TNA or ECW. So he's someone you could use without hurting your upper card roster to push the younger guys. Just my opinion. I imagine at some point we'll see something like a no disqualification match or a table match or something to that effect between the two to end the feud. Now, coming from that, we're going to go right into our question of the week. The question of the week from last week was, who would you put on the Mount Rushmore of TNA? Now, before I get into my answer, let me give you what some of my friends have said. First is from our friend Zombies40. I would have to say AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, and Bobby Roode. All of these guys are awesome wrestlers that brought something different to TNA. AJ with his amazing wrestling style, Joe with his power, agility, speed in the ring, Daniels for his athletic ability but also charisma, and Roode for his overall wrestling skills and intensity that he brings to the match. 4 great choices right there. Next up's our friend Luke Norman. I would put AJ Styles because he is the best they had from the start, Bobby Roode, longest reigning world champion, Jeff Hardy because he's the most over guy right now, and Sting because unlike most WCW, ECW guys, he didn't jump to WWE but TNA. Good choices as well, and when I get to mine I'll explain why some of these guys that you guys are mentioning may or may not be on mine. And last but not least, from our friend Joseph Hatcher, I put Bobby Roode, Jeff Hardy, Sting, Kurt Angle. The reason is why they stand out in my opinion. They've gotten most of the spotlight and have shown me and people worldwide what they could do, but they are some future stars I would have put there, but I thought these guys deserved it more. Okay. We're going to go, and I'm going to go into mine and then I'll explain why I picked some of the people I did as opposed to some of the people I didn't. First is Jeff Jarrett, the founder of TNA. Basically, that gets him on there just for that. Besides the fact that he's a multiple-time TNA champion, And for about the first 7 to 8 years of the company, never really left the main event picture, kind of was one of the faces of the company. All that combined kind of makes him my first, what I quote unquote first pick. Next up, AJ Styles. As everybody said here, AJ Styles is exactly what his moniker says, phenomenal. The fact that he's not in TNA right now hurts TNA. AJ Styles is to TNA what Sting was to WCW, what Tommy Dreamer was to ECW, what Hulk Hogan was to the WWF. He is the face of the corporation. He's the guy that when you say TNA, most wrestling fans go, oh, AJ Styles. That's how much he means to it. Next up for me, Bobby Roode. Just like everybody said, been there since day one, multiple time tag team champion, probably in 2 of the most successful tag teams they've ever had in TNA. Also the longest running world champion once he decided to go with a singles run. Just a great, great talent, a great wrestler, and one of the guys that really is just a TNA star. And my last pick, the 4th one, I kind of was torn on this one. I wanted to put Awesome Kong on here, but unfortunately, I don't think her time in TNA warranted. So I went with Samoa Joe. Like the guys that said before, he brought something different, he brought an intensity. He's a solid guy that's, whether he's a tag champion, a world champion, ex-champion, he's done it all in TNA. And he's one of these guys, like I said with Styles and Roode, that identifies most with TNA. Now, the reason I didn't put some people on, Christopher Daniels would have been a great pick. Unfortunately, we only have 4 spots, so somebody had to miss out. Jeff Hardy, to me, as great as Jeff Hardy is in TNA, I still consider Jeff Hardy, and Kurt Angle for that matter, I still consider both of them WWE wrestlers. The majority of their fame came in WWE. So to me, they're WWE guys. Same thing with Sting and WCW. Not that they haven't had great careers in TNA, but to me, if you're doing a Mount Rushmore for TNA, you don't want to put a guy on there that you look at and go, oh, there's Jeff Hardy. He was the WWE Intercontinental Champion. Or I remember his feud with CM Punk. Or Kurt Angle, I remember him wrestling Brock Lesnar. You're going to go, oh, Samoa Joe. I remember Samoa Joe wrestling AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels. Bobby Roode, I remember him as part of Beer Money. They were awesome. AJ Styles, I remember, and you could just put any AJ Styles match on there. Jeff Jarrett, he's the guy that founded TNA, ain't he? There's my reason for why I picked who I picked and why I didn't pick who I didn't pick. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go into our question of the week for next week. This one's quite simple. Right now, Bobby Lashley is the World Heavyweight Champion. Who do you think is going to be the next World Heavyweight Champion? Let us know what you think. Hit us up on Facebook. Hit us up on Twitter. Put it down where? Down there in the comments. Make sure you click the like button as well. The more likes we get, the more that YouTube spreads our videos and shows out to people, so we could gain more viewers, more friends, get more opinions, share our thoughts with the wrestling world out there in large. Next, we're going to go into our good segments of the night, the stuff that I actually really enjoyed. The opening segment with Kurt Angle coming out, talking about what he was going to do for later on, only to be interrupted by Lashley, Kenny King, and an MVP, which sees them talk bad about New York, which brings out Tommy Dreamer, leads right into a no DQ match with Dreamer versus Lashley. Thought this was a good match, a little bit different from what Lashley has been doing. Lashley picking up the win, a solid win. It shows a little bit of range, gives us more character development to him. The one problem I've always had with Lashley is the same problem I had with Bill Goldberg. They're too one-dimensional. They're too much of that monster destroyer. They don't... and Lashley doesn't quite have the charisma Goldberg had to pull it off. Goldberg had amazing charisma. I might not be a fan of his, but you could see when he stepped in the ring he was something special. Lashley, to a lesser degree, same thing. But this gave us a little bit different spin, showed us that Lashley could be tough, could be hardcore if he needs to be. So I think it added a little bit of a dimension to Lashley that hasn't been there in the past. I liked the match. The only thing I didn't possibly like is they could have made it the main event, being as it's your World Heavyweight Champion. Next up, Madison Rayne versus Taryn Terrell. Probably my favorite match of the night. I thought they went out there and absolutely brought it. Two of the best knockouts they have in TNA. It's an amazing thing when their division puts on several quality matches week after week. Taryn Terrell, breath of fresh air. Madison Rayne, one of the best knockouts TNA's ever had. Just a great match. Solid in-ring action. What can you say? When they do it right, it's great. When they do it wrong, it's a train wreck. Next up, we had an in-ring interview with Bobby Roode and Eric Young, talking about what happened last night, with them both kind of, I guess, tying, coming out of the cage, which sets us up for next week. They're going to face each other. They show the respect for each other that properly is deserved. I imagine the match will go down amicably next week. I think maybe, we might see a little bit something that changes one of the two to a heel come next week. A little bit too face-on-face worthy interview, but still effective, still carried over why we should tune in next week for that match. Coming off of that, we had James Storm debuting the revamped Great Sonata, who comes out with a very much Great Muta style face paint. Matter of fact, I think it's a direct copy of face paint he wore before. Yeah, Great Sonata versus his biggest challenge in TNA to date, Austin Aries. And they put on a pretty good match. These guys mesh well together. We see Sonata take some of the Muta mannerisms. Even at the point in the match, he sprays the Asian mist into Aries' face, which leads to the win of the match. It was a good match. I enjoyed it. I like where they're going with this. I hope the payoff is going to be maybe Sonata versus the Great Muta at some point, because I love the Great Muta, and anytime we get to see him wrestle, to me is a bonus. Next up, we had another in-ring segment, probably the feel-good segment of the night and maybe the year in professional wrestling. We see Kurt Angle bringing out Chris Melendez, who's an amputee war veteran, lost his leg fighting for our country, the United States, for those of you who live in different countries, and he wanted to become a wrestler. So the Wounded Warrior Project, which is an awesome organization, go and donate to that. A lot of, we see now the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which I did myself too, another great company, great organization. There's a lot more awareness coming out for these organizations, which is fabulous. Get some money in their pockets so we can get some people some real help. Wounded Warriors, another great organization for some of our soldiers that have gone and fought for us and ended up getting injured, like Chris Melendez losing his leg. I digress. Wounded Warrior Project puts him in contact with Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson says, well, I'd love to train you, but I don't train anybody, but I know two guys that do. And it's Bully Ray and Devon, Team 3D. And they talk about him, and Bully says, we trained him for free. All in all, a great segment. They mentioned that there was something like 250 of the Wounded Warriors in the crowd. So great moment with a war hero coming in. Hopefully it becomes more than just a great feel-good moment and he's actually a good wrestler. So we'll see going forward. I thought it was a good thing. Stuff like this makes your show special. This is the kind of thing that shows like Entertainment Tonight or TMZ. This is the kind of thing that they pick up and they use on their show to help, which ultimately helps garner ratings, which ultimately is the name of the game. Like it or not. We'd love to see all this great stuff happen, but ratings is the bottom line. And last but not least, the main event, the Wolves versus the Hardy Boys versus Team 3D and what's being billed as 3 of the top tag teams in the world. Fantastic match. Fantastic interaction with the 3 teams. The Hardys and Team 3D have charisma and chemistry going back probably close to 15 years with each other now. You add the Wolves into the mix, who are one of the top teams in the world, 2 of the top wrestling talents in the world, and you get something special. I thought this was a great match. I thought they left enough on the table because there's going to be 2 more matches that we could see more coming later on. But I thought it was an awesome match, an awesome main event. Team 3D won. I got to see the 3D, which is my favorite move. Sorry. I'm a big Dudley's, aka Team 3D fan. The actual move 3D is one of my favorite wrestling moves. That, the Poison Mist, which we seen earlier, you know, makes me happy. There are certain moves that when you see them, they just make you happy and they stand out and they're different and they're fun. Those are some of those moves. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go right into our ratings for the week. Whether you've seen the show or not before, we have a 1 to 5 scale. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a Dixie Carter, 2's a Rockstar Spud, 3 is a Gunner, 4 is a James Storm, 5 is Bobby Roode. I'm going to give this show a 4, a James Storm. Thought it was very solid. Another TNA episode that's been really good, really fun to watch. You had hardcore wrestling, you had chain wrestling, you had women's wrestling, you had a feel-good moment, you had everything you can potentially want in a wrestling show. And kudos to TNA for putting on such a good show. Definitely interesting, definitely fun to watch, kept my interest from the beginning to the end. But basically, that's all I have to say about that. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.